and thought, no, this is the biggest one. This is the biggest hurdle that if they can recreate this, this is the biggest hurdle they've got to come. Are there any artists in here? We got one person on Facebook and one artist. I see a half a hand back. He's like, I draw a dog and it looks like a cat. But other than that, I'm an artist. Artist, right? You raise your hand. Is that Mark? Mark, you're an artist? Let me ask you a question. I want you, forget medieval times. We're 2018, what was March 30th? What's today's date?
31st.
31st. March 31st, 2018, right? And I want you to recreate this for me so that we can fool some people. But you can't use any paints or pigments or powders or oils or dyes or resins or any other artistic medium, because see, as soon as you use those mediums, when you touch the medium to the cloth, what's it going to do? It's going to penetrate. There's no way it's not going to penetrate through the cloth. And see, the burn marks penetrate all the way through the cloth. This picture up here, I was talking with Barry, he's the one who snapped that. He said this was the first time that anybody had, there was a different cloth that was sewed onto the backside by the nuns. The nuns did the French invisible weave, they did the patchwork, but they also sewed an entire cloth onto the back to keep some rigidity to the shroud to try and preserve it. This is the first time that they're about to look on the other side of the cloth and see, is the image there? What they found was that the water was there, the blood was there, the fire damage was there, everything had penetrated through the cloth, the image isn't there. Here's why. The image is on the first 2 microfibers of a single thread. Now let me try to break that down. Hopefully some people in here know how to sew. Sewers? Okay, we're doing much better, all right. All right, it's been a while. It's been a little while. It's because we don't have to anymore. Like, we just buy a new pair of jeans. Back when I got jeans, I mean, those suckers were going to last me 10 years. My mom was going to sew patches on them, and I was going to have like plaid patchwork all over the place, and I was going to wear those jeans. But nowadays, it's like they just sell them with holes, so that way you can't tell if you did it or not. No, Mom, that was already there. So, if you took thread, and you played this evil game of threading the needle, and you know, if you're laughing, you know you've done it before. You get it wet because that's going to help all those things. And then you do this. And you think you've got it. So you do this, you reach around, it's got to be quick. You got to reach around real quick before it's not there. And then you think you got it, and you go like this, and you pull, and like half of it stays behind. And then you got to start over again. And then you get, tell me you haven't done it, then you get that one microfiber that sticks out, and that's your hope. You're like, if I could just get that one microfiber through there, I've got this down, and I'm going to, because each thread, one single thread, is composed of sometimes 20 to 150 microfibers that are spun together to make a single thread. Everybody understand what I'm saying? The image is on the first 2 microfibers of one single thread. It's called a superficial image because the image really isn't there. It almost plays a trick with your mind that the image is even on the cloth at all. Here's a close-up. It's this. There's not even enough resin, I'm just going to say for lack of better terms, on the first 2 microfibers to get a sample off of it to figure out what it is. They've gotten pollen off this. The pollen, there's 3 different types of pollen. The only place in the entire world where all 3 pieces grow, all 3 pollens grow in one area is in a circle that confines within Jerusalem. They've gotten, they call it catastrophe dirt, I guess is what they call it, off his knee, and it's post-wound dirt that was stuck to the blood. They've gotten the dirt off of there, the Jerusalem dirt. They've taken limestone off the bottom of the man's feet. It's 3M made of a special tape, and they pulled limestone off the bottom of the man's feet. That limestone is only found in tombs within Jerusalem. So he's got all of the different things that they've gotten off of that point back to this shroud definitely came from the Jerusalem area, not the European area. Either that, or you're going to have to tell me that the forger traveled from the European area over to Jerusalem in the medieval times, collected just those 3 pollens, the road dirt and the lime off and put it onto his feet, put the road dirt on his knees, and put the pollen on there just so he could fool us. That's a good guy. I would like to meet this guy because he's very intelligent. So the image isn't there. So if I told you that, Mark, I wanted to hire you, and I told you that you couldn't use any paints, powders, pigments, oils, dyes, resins, nothing, you'd be like, dude, I'm out. I'm going to complicate it though. The closer you get to the image, and you can do this afterwards, the closer you actually stand to the image, it goes away. You can't see it. So if you're trying in order to get the image on there without it penetrating, I suppose you'd have to have some sort of an unknown substance with a single horsehair brush. Not, a horsehair brush that has just one single horsehair, and you'd have to meticulously try and get it on the first 2 microfibers without penetrating there. You'd have to get so close to it that you'd be under a microscope trying to do it, yet the closer you get, the image disappears. You have to be at least 1 foot to 3 foot before it comes into clarity. Do you see the impossibilities of that? That's why this has become one of my favorite anomalies, is because this is why they can't replicate it. If they could figure out how to get this part, past this part, the rest of it I'm sure they could figure out how to replicate. But they can't even get that part. Everybody on board? Yeah. That's pretty cool, huh? That's why this hasn't gone away yet. So the image is actually a photo negative. This is where, for the young people in the room, this is the hardest thing to explain. For us old timers, we get back when there was actually, like, you would take photo onto film, and you would take film into a dark room, and you would put it under the solution, and I did this, my next door neighbor used to do this when I was fascinated as a kid, and you would work out the solution, and it would whoop, you'd see the image come up, but all the lights and darks were reversed because it was in the negative format. Then you would take the negative format, and you would photo blast it into this positive format, okay? Everybody picking up what I'm putting down? Half of you are like, what? So here's the thing. Are you ready? If we can get past this part of the presentation, it's all downhill from here. So put your thinking caps on. This is what Scott does when he's overwhelmed. He goes, so everybody put your thinking caps on. Okay, like 3 people thinking. Okay, good. You got your thinking caps on now. So here's the thing. The image on the shroud in its natural form is a photo negative. When you take the positive image is a negative. When you take the positive image of the negative and turn it into a negative, it turns into a positive image of a man. Which means, I'm telling you, if we can get past this all, we're like family. We're going somewhere after this. Because this is positively what your eye sees. That's what it looks like. But when you take the positive image of it and turn it into a negative image, you get the positive image of a man, which means that in order for the negative to create a positive, the positive had to be formatted in the negative format to start with. Yeah! And you think I'm going to explain this to somebody in the medieval times? Like, we're in the 21st century. We got rover Mars going on, and that's still hard to explain. This is the totality of it. On the left is the shroud in its natural format. On the right is the negative format, but on the right, when you turn it into a negative, it turns into a positive image of a man. Now, Joe was mentioning this. You can actually come up here, and if your phone is fixed right, you can do this. It's the coolest thing. So, like this is in the positive, but I can take and do this in 3, and it changes it into a negative format. It reverses the colors, and all of a sudden in live, I can sit here and go through, and I can look at his hands and his feet and everything. It's neat. Y'all got to do that. It's the coolest thing. I learned that from a kid at a Christian school one time. Seriously, I was getting to roll it up, and he's like going like this. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? And you're like, what are you doing? And I look at his phone, and he had it flipped, and he was looking at it in real time, and I was like, oh. I've only seen, to be honest with you, I've never taken that picture and flipped it myself, so I've only seen the research. I had never been able to physically do it in front of me, and I was like, whoa! I mean, I was like a little kid in a candy store all of a sudden. So that's what I would call the second anomaly. The first anomaly is, how in the world are you going to get a superficial image on the first 2 microfibers without any paint, powders, oils, dyes, pigments, resins, or anything else with a single horsehair brush that you've got to be at least 3 feet away from. You'd be like, this, trying to do it, it ain't going to work. The second one is it's actually in a negative format. How in the world could I, in the medieval times, go up to somebody and say, I need you to do that without using any resins or anything like that, but more importantly, I need you to do it in a negative format so that when photography is invented, they can go, whoa, because it's a positive image. So that's the second anomaly. Y'all enjoying this yet?
Yeah.
You see why I like talking about it? So here's the third anomaly. The VP8 analyzers invented back in the 60s. This is specifically designed, before we could send a rover to Mars, we wanted to know, what does Mars look like? And so we would send up a satellite that would take a very special photograph, and that very specialized photograph would capture data within that photograph it'd be put into the VP8 analyzer, and the VP8 analyzer would spit out a topographical map. It must be used with photographs that are specifically made for that purpose. You can't just take a normal picture, put it into the VP8 analyzer, and have it spit out a three-dimensional map. It's not going to do it because the light to dark contrast won't work. You have to have, it's called distance light, and without distance light, it's not going to work. Well, here's the thing. By this point, I'm an expert on the Shroud when I see this. And I know that and I've conceptualized and I've understood, because some of you are still going, I can't believe it's on the first 2 microfibers single thread. I've had years to chew on that fact for a while now, and I'm watching, so I know it's a superficial image. Y'all know what superficial means? It's fake. It's not really there. Like superficial people, they'll put on one face and then they'll go home and they're totally different. We call them superficial people. So I'm watching this, realizing that the image on the Shroud is superficial. Watch what this guy says.
When you look at the Shroud, you have the impression that it's a picture, but it's not a picture at all. It's a database of information.
Database? It's a superficial image. When you put the Shroud of Turin inside of the VP8 analyzer, it spits out a topographical map of a man. Look, some of these are just my favorite. Look. How in the world, if again, they would have, somebody trying to recreate it today would have to jump over that first one of creating the image on the first 2 microfibers. After that, it would have to be in a negative format, which I believe they could do that with enough creativity. Somebody could figure out how to do that. But now they've got to encrypt three-dimensional data within this superficial image. Again, I'm not trying to convince you this is the burial cloth of Jesus. That's not my goal here today. I'm only telling you this has been studied, scrutinized, peer-reviewed, and this is what comes back. I don't understand how they do it. So what could have discolored the image on the cloth? This is where it gets very interesting. But this is maybe 3.5 years old, this research. I remember when it first came out and was being talked about. Gary Habermas was the first one who told me about it. He had introduced me to Mark Antonacci, who was really knee-deep in the research on this particular topic. And about 3.5 years ago,
the most popular theory.
I just decided to go on its own. About 3.5 years ago, the Italian team of scientists came up with this, and I'll be honest with you, I knew it was coming, but I was absolutely blown away when it happened. Watch this.
The most popular theory of image formation on the Shroud today is that of some form of energy or radiation being transmitted from the body enshrouded in the cloth to the cloth itself.
Is it possible that during the resurrection, Christ's body turned to light, giving off the radiation which imprinted his image on the Shroud?
I don't think it's not only possible. How many people think that's scriptural? Mount of Transfiguration, what happened? He was illuminated from not the outside in. There wasn't some big giant stadium light that kind of shone in on him so that Moses and Elijah could look him over. From the inside out, he was completely illuminated, and Moses and Elijah looked him over and said, "You're he." What about going all the way back to Moses coming off of that mountain? He had spent those, 80 days with God, a total of 80 days with God. He comes off that mountain, and what's his face? Glowing. Glowing. There wasn't like a shining light out here going, man, you put some powder on, you're kind of shiny. No, he was glowing from the inside out to the point where they were like, man, cover your face up, bro. I can't look at you, you know? It's not just a possibility. It's a scriptural truth that somehow, some way, and don't ask me to answer how that works, because that's one for God to answer once I get there, and then I'll really be going like this, trying to really wrap my mind around that. But nonetheless, I think it's a scriptural possibility. So here's where it really started was with this X-ray image thing, because see, the forgers got it wrong. This is what people were saying. Well, the forgers have the fingers way too long. They have no idea what they're doing. If you look on the right is an image of the Shroud. This is a man's hand, and sure enough, those fingers are way too long. Well, that forger didn't know what he was doing at all. Let's wrap it up and go home. Here's the problem: if that forgery was not a forgery but an X-ray, then your finger bones go way back down into here. They don't stop at the flesh here, which is also why I don't care for not that I don't care for them, I don't think I care at all. If they put the spike here, because again it doesn't define my faith, but if you want to be historically correct, the spike did not go through the hand like traditionally thought, it went straight through here. Because if they put it here, it would have just ripped out, because there's nothing to stop it, and flesh would have ripped out when he was pushing himself up and coming back down to breathe. It would have just ripped out. But if you look, the man also has no thumbs. So here's the question. Well, did the forger just forget thumbs? Let me ask you a question. What runs right through here? Any doctors here? Your median nerve runs straight through those two bones where you've got the space of death stop right there. And your median nerve, if you press right here, and I have carpal tunnel so I can feel it even more than some of you, but if you press right here, you'll feel a pressure running back on your thumbs. When that spike that was at least this big around went through the space of death stop, which would have perfectly held him to the cross, it split the median nerve in half, collapsing the thumb on itself. And so why doesn't the man on the shroud have thumbs? Because anatomically, if he went straight through there, collapsing it would have gone over. The fingers are long because it's an x-ray image versus a mistake by a forger. Again, if this is a forgery, this guy was sheerly brilliant to think about all those different aspects of anatomy and everything else going forward. But this is what really started it. On the left is a shroud, on the right is a skull. And Gary was giving a presentation, and on the front row was a dentist. And he stopped Gary and said, "I know what that is." Well, this wasn't superimposed. He was just looking at it. He goes, "I know what that is. Now, that's an X-ray, but it's actually a pan array. You have to put." Again, and I had this done, I know exactly what this is, because I had to have my mouth x-rayed. They have to put the object inside of your mouth and shoot the radiation out and take a convex picture of it in order to get an accurate picture that lays down in 2 dimensions. And you can actually see the teeth coming along here and then count them straight going over as you put it next to it. Again, backing up the fact that the radiation actually came from the inside of the person going out in order to get that picture done correctly. So I'm going to show you this video, and this for me seals the deal on the impossibility of it.
The Telegraph reports the scientists say the technology that would have been needed to create the marks on the shroud simply was not available in medieval times. They concluded that the exact shade, texture, and depth of the imprints on the cloth could only be produced with the aid of ultraviolet lasers, technology that was clearly not available in medieval times. In case there was any doubt about the preternatural degree of energy needed to make such distinct marks, the report spells it out. This degree of power cannot be reproduced by any normal UV source built to date.
Built to date. We still don't have a machine that's able to produce. I mean, we can send somebody to Mars if we really wanted to. We can get the technology to send somebody to Mars. We can clone you if you want to be cloned. It's not that we're not technologically advanced enough, and we still don't have the machine capable of producing that much preternatural degree of energy to cause the image on the shroud. So could it be a medieval forgery? I don't even want to know your answer. For me, that's an impossibility. And again, if somebody can take this and recreate it, okay, fine, I'm good to go. But until then, Frank Turk wrote a book called, and Norm Geisler, along with him, wrote a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." I don't have enough facts to not believe that's his shroud. You know what I mean? I don't have it. The only facts I have point back to something supernatural had to be the creator behind the thing and the resurrection. If that's the case, the shroud is a snapshot of the very first second of the resurrection when God said, "Breathe!" And Jesus, the breath of life, came back into him, and that's a snapshot of that first second. So here's where I'm going to go. Is it Jesus? Does anybody know Gary Habermas, the name Gary Habermas? Yeah? Quite a few of you. You know he's like Grand Poobah. I love him. He'll come into the green room at apologetics conferences and walk up. He hit me on the head with a book so hard one time. I was sitting at this table and he came from around the corner and he just smacked me on the head and I was like, "What are you doing? What's going on, Glander?" And I was like, "You are just a big, giant kid." But he is Grand Poobah. He'll walk in and punch people in the arm. And you don't walk in and punch Josh McDowell in the arm unless you're Grand Poobah, right? I'm kind of building a case for Gary. And I love Gary. He's just a great man. But he's Grand Poobah. So when he says something, you're like, "Yes, sir, I'm listening, Professor, doctor." And he said, so the first time I ever talked to Gary, we get to this point, and he goes, "Oh, is it Jesus? That's easy." And I'm just being honest with you. I thought, "Ooh, I realize you're Gary Habermas. I get that part. Like, I knew who he was well enough to say, I get that part. But man, that's a jump I was never going to take." And he said, "No, that's actually easy." I said, "Well, pray tell. You're Dr. Habermas, go for it." He says, "If you're going to teach a Sunday school class on Roman crucifixion, and you want to be historically accurate to Roman crucifixion, you want your Sunday school class to really understand the dynamics of Roman crucifixion, historically speaking, do not use the gospel accounts. I said, why? He said, because there are three very unique things that, back up, he said we have thousands of accounts of Roman crucifixion. Romans were in love with torture. They took the not the cat of nine tails, they had one of those, but they took the rope, the Jewish three-corded whip that had the two lead balls on there, and they took, because if you were hit 13 times, bless you, if you were hit 13 times with the whip, that was 13 times 3 is 39, which was the 40 minus 1, right? So they would hit 13 times with this three-quartered whip that had these lead balls on it that would come down and break the capillaries underneath the skin. It was a very evil, torturous thing. But they took it a step further. They said, wait a second. What if we take these lead balls that we're putting on the end and we crush goat skull, which is the most damaging of any bone that's in an animal because of the way that it shears and fragments. It's very sharp, metal shards and glass shards. What if we mix the three of those within the lead? Now when we come down, we've got the lead weight hitting then breaking the capillaries, but the goat's bone, skull bone, the glass and the metal is going to stick down and rip the shreds of skin with it. They loved torture. And so we have thousands of accounts of crucifixion. Thousands of them because they loved it. We only have one account, and it's found in the Gospels, of these three things that happened. The uniqueness of Jesus' crucifixion was he was the only one that had a spear wound. No other historical accounts account for a spear wound. They didn't need to. They would break the legs, and that would be the end of it. They stuck a spear up in there to make sure that he was dead. And on the shroud, you can see the spear wound right here. You know the first thing that stood out to me, it's the oddest thing, when I first went to pick this up, was the blood that was resting on there. It's sitting in the small of the back, right here in that area. Water, blood, liquid finds the path of least resistance. Again, the forger would have had to have thought about, okay, so it's running out there. It's actually on the right side. The reason why that looks like on his left side is because if this is his right side, you do this and you pull it off, the mirror image makes it look like the left side because of the way the cloth was pulled off. So he's got a spear wound on his right side. Blood comes down and collects along the small of the back. And so I thought about, man, that's where the majority of the blood coming out of the spear wound is. That's pretty good. But the spear wound matches the only account in Roman crucifixions that actually have a spear wound. Then you have the non-broken legs. John 19:33, but when they came to Jesus, they found that he was already dead. They did not break his legs, which fulfills Scripture. The reason why we know the legs aren't broken is because, again, the image is more like an x-ray. And we can tell on the facial image that there's a break across the nose right here, and there was his right eye is almost closed. They can tell that he's got a wound on his right shoulder that opened up after the initial woundings and blah, blah, blah. They can tell you so much stuff about this. Again, this was in the 1980s, was in a symposium that lasted like three months, I think. It was at a portion of the Omni, and for 3 months people traveled around the world to teach and learn. 3 months. I'm taking up 45 minutes. 3 months they went on about this to learn. So they didn't have broken legs, and by the way, the break in the nose doesn't violate Scripture because that's not a bone, that's cartilage, but we can still see it. And then the last of all things, he had the crown of thorns. You can see the wounds here and the wounds on the back of his head, and I don't think the crown was this dainty little, again, the spikes are through here. He's got blonde hair, blue eyes, he's got like one cut on him, and he's got this dainty crown. That's not an accurate image of the cross, of the crucifix. It's just not accurate. His body was beaten so badly. And a crown of thorns was not made by some Roman guard who just wanted to go do it. I bet you he lost the bet or lost the lottery and had to go do it. And it was more like a bush that he would go out and just create and smash on top of his head. But again, there's only one account in all of Roman crucifixion methods that has a crown of thorns, that has a spear wound, and they didn't break his legs. Only one. That's why if you're going to teach on Roman crucifixion methods, you don't use the gospel because it's not historically accurate when it comes to what they would normally do. So is it Jesus? Again, I'm not here to convince you if it is or isn't. I'm just telling you, I can't dismiss the shroud scientifically for what it is. And now it's got the only 3 marks that were unique to Christ are also on the shroud. So I'm going to close with this. John goes in. This is John chapter 20, verse 8. It says, finally the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside, and he saw, and he believed. Now this is a very strange scripture because John chapter 20, verses 9 says they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. This is complete, this is just my thoughts. This is not